Welcome to Goblin-Inc. My name is Ruse Cruz, and today we're going to be looking at our in-game Ascendency tier list. This tier list was constructed by everyone in Goblin-Inc, and a lot of work was put into this. We found the best players and the best builds for every single Ascendancy, and we've linked them all, and then ranked them all against each other to look at what is the strongest Ascendancies and what are the best builds for those Ascendancies. Now, I think we have a lot of credibility as a team because of our performance this season. See, while everyone else was hyped about Deadeye and hyping on Deadeye, and even still are hyping on Deadeye, I think we were correct in identifying that Amazon is an entire tier above Deadeye, and the results speak for themselves. This season, we were rank 1 on 4 out of 6 classes, and the only class we weren't rank 1 on was our Amazon players. And what's funny is, the first level 100 in the world, the fastest player in the entire world was an Amazon player. Now, this might come as a bit of a surprise, but let me lay out why Amazon is so much stronger than Deadeye, and then we're going to get into a lot more spicy opinions, and some opinions that are more normal, but there's a lot in our tier list that's going to be different from what a lot of other people believe. So let's start. What separates Amazon from Deadeye is largely its survivability. See, as a team, we end up spending most of our time farming 150 Delirious maps, which is some of the hardest content in the game. And whenever we've had an Amazon player out, we've always looked for a Deadeye sub because there's so many good Deadeye players. However, Deadeye players literally just cannot survive in this content, and they even also do less damage than Amazon. Amazon is able to do more damage than Deadeye while being almost completely immortal in the hardest content this game can possibly throw at you. This is largely thanks to a combination of Mystic Harvest, which gives you Life Leech based on your elemental damage, and the Ascenta Sanguis, which allows your Life Leech to recover your energy shield. This combination allows Amazon to tank things they have absolutely no right tanking. Even when your carry forgets to put on the correct support gems, he should be punished and killed for this, but somehow he just manages to live, as you can see in this clip here. No other class in the game could survive this, and on top of that, Amazon still even does more damage than Deadeye. In terms of movement speed, Amazon is typically going to be about as fast as Deadeye. The only thing is, Amazon can get to like 180, 190 movement speed. Deadeye can get plus 10% over Amazon because of Tailwind. So the only thing Deadeye really has going for it over Amazon is Tailwind, and basically every other component, Amazon wins. And that is why the world's first level 100 was Amazon, and that's why us and the other top teams in the world who are playing 6-mans are all playing with Amazon DPS instead of Deadeye. Now, that is not to say Deadeye is a bad build. Deadeye is exceptionally strong, and it's the strongest Ascendancy besides Amazon. And remember, guys, as part of this, I do want to shout out the best players for those classes and give links to their builds. So for Amazon, obviously the best players are going to be our very own Ace of Spades and Sanctum, so definitely check out their builds. And for Deadeye, the best player is going to be Fubgun. Fubgun's guide was very well constructed, and he's always been on top of the metagame. And, you know, like I was saying, yes, Amazon is significantly better than Deadeye, but Deadeye is significantly better than every other Ascendancy. Now, the running joke in our group was to call Deadeye Dead Guy, but there's a lot of good stuff Deadeye does bring to the table. It has incredible damage, incredible mobility, and also very respectable amount of survivability. It just doesn't quite match up to Amazon. So for Deadeye, you definitely want to check out Fubgun, as he is going to be, you know, the front of the meta player who's always figuring out the next best thing to do with the Ascendancy. Now, the next build I want to talk about, the next Ascendancy, is a severely underrated Ascendancy, I think because of some bad experiences people had, specifically around the Act 2 campaign boss. But this Ascendancy is actually arguably as good as Deadeye. It's definitely an A-tier Ascendancy, and as we get more information, I really do want to bump it up in the tier list, hopefully. But that Ascendancy is Pathfinder, and I specifically want to shout out J-Mac and Fat Belly, who are some of the best Pathfinder players in the world, and they are really showing how crazy strong this Ascendancy is. They are able to clear, you know, all content in the game crazy fast. They're able to destroy bosses faster than almost any other build in the game, and even able to do 10 million DPS on a 1 divine budget. This build is incredibly strong and severely underrated, and if you're looking for an off-meta build with somehow a 1% play rate, but is one of the best Ascendancies in the entire game, I definitely recommend you check out Pathfinder. Now, up next, I want to talk about Blood Mage, because, you know, we've talked a lot about controversial stuff. Let's talk about something safe that everyone agrees on, which is that Blood Mage is absolutely cracked. Blood Mage is going to be one of the fastest clearing builds in the game, and it's also going to be extremely tanky. So definitely check out Squishy's guide. I think Squishy is pretty much ahead of the meta right now when it comes to Blood Mage stuff, and this build is just incredible. Now, the downsides of Blood Mage compared to, the other Ascendancies, why it's not in S tier, is simply because that Blood Mage is just a bit slow. It doesn't have Roa, it doesn't have all the crazy movement speed nodes, so even though it brings the damage, the survivability, and very importantly, the recovery that these other Ascendancies bring, it just doesn't have the same mobility, but Blood Mage is extremely strong. So definitely check out the Spark build linked below. Now, next, I want to talk about what's considered to be an F-tier Ascendancy, because I want to, get back to controversial stuff, okay? Because we don't talk about enough controversial stuff yet. And what I really want to focus on with this is that the gap between the bottom builds and the top builds is large, but I think it's not quite as big as people think it is. So in F tier, of course, I'm throwing Acolyte of Shilelu, however you say that. I don't even know how to say it, doesn't matter because the class has been irrelevant since launch. But this build is still pretty decent. As you can see from this clear from Miso, this build is still able to clear fairly respectably in tier 15 maps, and it's still able to pop Zesh for a nice, 7 or 8 million damage hit. So even though this build, this Ascendancy, is an F tier Ascendancy, I just want to point out that this isn't nearly as bad as you would kind of conceptualize an F tier Ascendancy to be, and there's still some cool stuff you can do, even on the really weak stuff. But moving back to, good builds that are worth playing. No, I'm just kidding. I think all... Okay, cut that.
No, I don't think I will.
But moving back to higher tier builds, up next, I really want to talk about Stormweaver, which is a lot of you guys know was my Ascendancy of choice this season, and it's what I played in our team and in all of my solo stuff. So Stormweaver is a very powerful Ascendancy that brings loads of damage and lots of utility, but I think it is going to exemplify some of the things that builds need to be higher tier. So you can see, I can kill Zesh in 3 seconds, I've got screen clearing AoE, everything about this Ascendancy looks great, but there's two huge problems. So the first one is that this Ascendancy does not have recovery. So you do have Clairvoyance, but it's on a 30-second cooldown. So every 30 seconds you do get some decent recovery, but if you ever get hit by a bunch of mobs, you're just going to bleed out and die very quickly. The other problem with this Ascendancy is it just doesn't have the same mobility that the higher tier Ascendancies have. This tier list is a very competitive tier list, so even though Stormweaver looks and acts and functions as powerfully as it does, these top tier Ascendancies just bring largely mobility to the table that the lower tier Ascendancies can't bring. That being said, if this was a tier list about team play, Stormweaver would probably be A tier because of Strike Twice, being able to apply 2 100% shocks, but this is a solo player tier list, which leaves Stormweaver in B tier. Now, up next, I want to talk about my favorite class in the game personally, and it's actually, even though I've never made a video about it, it's actually my most played class, which is Warrior. And let's start by talking about Titan. What makes Titan so strong is that it has so many good builds. A great example of this is Palsteron's Tempest Flurry build. There is not very much that Titan can't play, and it can even go so far as Quarterstaff, crossbows. You can even play a Spellcaster probably. There's got to be a way to make that work, and overall this Ascendancy has a lot of interesting options. It's also just got normal warrior stuff, as you can see from Requip's Gaming, where it's able to nuke bosses and have some pretty cool leaping and some nice damage, and then it's even got some really cheeky stuff, as you can see from Lazy Exile, where it's able to play like this really fast moving Molten Blast build that's able to rapidly move around the screen and clear a lot of stuff. The problem with Titan is none of its builds are really that amazing. They're all solid, but nothing that really pops out and puts it up into higher tiers. But Titan is definitely a tendency to keep your eye on, particularly because of the hulking form, of course, which is going to give you a 50% increase to all of your small passive skills. Now, up next, let's talk about Warbringer. So Warbringer got a lot of changes this season, and overall, it's pretty decent. It has great survivability with Jade Heritage, which effectively gives you 10% physical damage reduction. It's also got Turtle Charm, which allows it to cap its block chance at 75%, which allows it to run the shield that's currently slipping my mind, that gives you extra damage equal to your block chance, so that shield becomes a 75% damage increase, which is pretty nice. And it's also able to run a really nice combo where from its Ascendancy, it gets Anvil's Weight, which allows it to break armor based on damage dealt, You combine that with Scavenge Plating, you gain armor based on armor broken. So you combine these two things, you break armor, you get a lot of armor, you stack a bunch of armor applies to elemental damage, and suddenly you've got a pretty tanky build. We've also got this Leap Herald Chain build that Leos board posted. Very cool build that's able to clear screens. Unfortunately, we can't see the bossing, but I think the bossing is a big reason why Warbringer isn't higher in the tier list. But both Titan and Warbringer are respectable builds that I could easily see something coming up that would bump them up the tier list. Now, up next, we got to talk about an Ascendency that has just dominated recently, and not even recently, but even last season it was very strong, which is the Lich. Lich is a very powerful Ascendency, in part because of its ability to play low life, but also because it's able to just play whatever strong. It's kind of like Titan in that sense, where Lich is always able to play whatever strong, but Lich currently just has better nodes and better access to builds. I'm sure a lot of you guys saw Soza, hopefully I'm saying that right, Soza's build, where he's demonstrated how powerful a crossbow Lich can be, in particular with these runes you can put in your boots where you get increased movement speed while below life. This build ends up being incredibly fast while being able to absolutely shred bosses, and you can see why we are putting the Lich into A tier. This class is just really strong, and you can also see it here with Dead Rabbit's Contagion ED build, which, you know, is probably an A tier build in its own right. Honestly, it's definitely a high B tier build at worst, and you can see Lich just has a lot of strong builds and overall just has a lot of cool things going for it. We're not even talking about minions because we couldn't find a really exceptional minion build for Lich, but minions are also very strong. Actually, you're going to see that coming out soon on our channel. Up next, let's talk about the other F tier Ascendancy, the only other F tier Ascendancy, which is the Smith of Kitava. Smith used to be one of the strongest Ascendancies, but this thing got absolutely wrecked. This Ascendancy got nerfed into oblivion, and on top of that, it's the mechanics that made it good also got reworked. So what I mean by that is, one of the things that used to make Smith really strong was you would take blood magic, so you convert all of your spell cost into life, which allowed you to pay a ridiculously high mana cost of skills, but with the reduction in the cost of spells, this is no longer nearly as strong. It also used to be the best Ascendancy in the game for dealing with elemental damage, but now that every Ascendancy is able to build armor applies to elemental damage, the value of those nodes really dropped off. All in all, Smith of Kitava was nerfed because of changes to the game systems, but also nerfed directly. The end result is that it's not as strong as it used to be. But again, as you're going to see, the Smith of Kitava from Jekko is able to absolutely smash bosses, and it's able to clear maps pretty easily. And this is an F tier Ascendancy we're talking about, okay? I don't think the gap between the best and worst Ascendancies is nearly as big as people make it out to be. But anyway, that is why Smith of Kitava is F tier. Up next, I want to talk about the Invoker, which is my personal, probably favorite Ascendancy in the game. It is so cool with so many different options and so many builds, but they're all like entwined with that flavor. I just love Invoker. It's so cool, man. And this season, there's really two builds that are taking over for this Ascendancy, which are Falling Thunder and Flicker Strike. Now, I think for Falling Thunder, you should follow Corbin's build. I think he did a really great job with it this season. He's able to clear screens, it looks great, and it's very strong. But I do think that Falling Thunder, I think, is more of a C tier build, but I think that Flicker Strike is absolutely crazy. And this build by Gene, I think, really exemplifies that. This build is incredibly strong, ripping bosses to pieces, obliterating maps. I love Flicker Strike. Honestly, if Flicker Strike was able to auto loot and didn't constantly have to run backwards to get loot, Invoker would be an A tier Ascendancy. But Flicker Strike is just as strong as it is and as fast as it clears maps. Because you have to backtrack to loot, Flicker Strike ends up being a little bit underwhelming. Flicker Strike can also sometimes get you killed by ending the Flicker Strike right in the middle of like a 30 mob breach and you just get clobbered to death. But overall, it's still strong enough to be an A tier Ascendancy for sure, and I definitely recommend you particularly play Flicker Strike, but if Falling Thunder is more your speed, you can check that build out as well. Now, let's talk about one of the D tier Ascendancies, specifically Chronomancer. So Chronomancer has a lot of really cool stuff going for it, especially the buffs to Quicksand Hourglass. Quicksand Hourglass is now a 30% more cast speed node, while also giving 30% more area of effect. This makes it a perfect candidate for Cast on X comment. And it, you know, the results are pretty decent. You can see here from this build by Paintmaster that this build actually has pretty good AoE and pretty respectable boss damage. Overall, though, I think think Chronomancer is a little bit undercooked. I think we're going to find as time goes on and more people play Chronomancer, there's actually some pretty cool stuff for Chronomancer. It might end up getting bumped up to C tier. We'll have to see what ends up happening. But for now, Chronomancer sits in D tier, despite having some pretty nice stuff. Next, let's talk about Witchhunter. I really like Witchhunter. I really like a lot of builds of this game, is what I'm realizing talking about this, but I do really like Witchhunter. Witchhunter has one of the coolest nodes in the form of Judge, Jury, and Executioner, which gives them Decimating Strike. Decimating Strike is a very powerful node because it's going to immediately cut off a certain percentage of mobs' health, which you can kind of think about as a damage multiplier. We're also able to take from the passive tree the nodes that buff both Decimating Strike and Culling Strike, which allow you to execute you're able to nuke mobs' health at the very start and then execute them at the end. This ends up being like a 50% damage multiplier against white mobs, and it ends up being like something around 25 or 30% against bosses. I forget the exact number, but these are very powerful nodes that are also generic and usable in a lot of different ways. Weapon Master also allows you to have 100 passive points, or 100 weapon swap points, so you're able to basically fully swap builds on your weapon swap if you want to. Nothing too crazy has come out from this yet, but I think it's only a matter of time. And we're also able to get access to Sorcery Ward. Now, Sorcery Ward is pretty good. So basically what Sorcery Ward is going to do is it's going to convert some of your armor and some of your evasion into a shield against elemental damage. Now, as strong as this is, it does massively reduce your physical damage reduction. So I don't think Sorcery Ward is a super insane defensive node, but it is pretty good. And overall, Witchhunter ends up being pretty solid. Specifically, this Shattering Palm build by Waggle, I think performs very well, and it's definitely worth checking out. I also think there's a lot of grenade builds and stuff like that that are probably a little bit underexplored right now on Witchhunter. But yeah, I think overall Witchhunter is a very solid Ascendency, and it very solidly lands itself in C tier, which might sound low, but honestly, C tier builds are still good builds. So, and up next, let's just start smashing through C tier. So up next, we have the Internalist. Internalist is a very cool Ascendency that has both great mobility from demon form as well as some very nice damage multipliers, and it also has a mana solution in the form of Pyromantic Pack, which allows you to basically deal damage to yourself instead of spending mana. This is a very interesting Ascendency with drawbacks that are as powerful as the buffs that its nodes give. The end result, though, is an Ascendency that is able to play minions, it can play Spellcaster, it can play a lot of good stuff. Now, for minions, the strongest Infernalist minion build I could find was from this player named Tung. I wish he had a build link. Unfortunately, he doesn't have one. But you can see here, he does pretty decent single target damage. It's not the best, but this is pretty respectable, right? For a minion build, this is pretty solid. And then for the caster version of the build, this Frost build is very cool by Funky Chicken, and this build has pretty decent AoE and very good boss damage. Very solid boss damage. Overall, Infernalist, pretty solid build, and definitely one worth looking at if you're looking for something pretty spicy to play. Now, Ritualist is also very interesting. It's got a lot of interesting things. It doesn't really amount to a super powerful build, but it is currently the best stat stacker, which kind of inherently puts it into C tier, because any kind of stat stacker build is going to be playing Ritualist. It also has some cool stuff where it can basically become immune to like freezes and stuns through Mind Phylacteries, but the build that I'm going to recommend is Sideka's, hopefully I'm saying that right, Hollow Palm build, which ends up looking pretty clean, right? This is a pretty fast farming build. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to find any boss clips from him, so I'm not entirely sure how the bossing is, but I think Ritualist is strong enough that once you have like really good jewelry and all that sort of things, there's a lot of decent builds that come together. Now, up next, let's talk about Gemling Legionnaire, which currently I am putting in D tier. And by I mean, of course, the whole team. So the problem with Gemling Legionnaire is that it ends up just being a lot worse than other Ascendancies, and its nodes just aren't that strong. It is okay, but like, dude, you're never going to be playing totems. Like, let's be real. Totems are so mediocre. There's some grenade builds that are all right. They look pretty good in AoE, but as soon as they get to a boss, they look terrible. But the best build, in our opinion, is Arkara's Whirling Slash build, which actually looks really solid. It's able to clear very quickly. It has a lot of mobility, kind of standard Whirling Slash stuff. I mean, if you haven't seen Whirling Slash before, this probably looks insane to you. It's pretty wild that this is a D tier build. The problem is it doesn't have a lot of tankiness, and its boss damage isn't so great. And Whirling Slash also requires a ton of gear to get to this level. But once you get it, honestly, Gemling isn't that bad. And finally, let's talk about Tactician. So Tactician does have some cool grenade builds, but unfortunately grenades are just like too slow in comparison to other things. Specifically like the totem grenade stuff. I think regular grenades are pretty okay, but totem grenades are just kind of slow. The build does look pretty decent until it gets to bosses. Overall, like Tactician is just kind of underwhelming. Polish That Gear is pretty good, where you get evasion as ailment threshold, and you gain the percentage of your armor as deflection rating. But overall, Tactician is just pretty underwhelming. It just does not have the boss damage to compete with these other Ascendancies. But that's going to do it for this video. Go support all these guys, man. Everyone that we linked in this video is a very competent, very skilled build creator. All these guys are at the front of the metagame for their classes. Definitely go check all these guys out. Go support them. And I appreciate you guys watching the whole video. My name is Cruz. I'll see you in the next video. Peace out, guys.